Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and become the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms further ahead on their quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself, but I hope you'll come along with me and find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Mother's Quest podcast. Before I share the details of this interview, I want to let you know that I've recently started a Patreon page. Patreon is an amazing platform to help fund the work of podcasters and other creators. By going to patreon.com/mothersquest, you can sign up to make a pledge for every new episode and help support the costs of bringing these conversations to you. If you're enjoying the podcast and have the ability to support, I would be so appreciative if you would visit the site, sign up for whatever level works for you, and experience some of the cool benefits that come with becoming an official patron. In this interview, I'm excited to share a thoughtful and honest conversation with wife, mother, freelance television anchor and reporter, volunteer for philanthropic causes, and entrepreneur Erika Greff. Erika lives in the heart of New York City with her husband and two sons, ages 13 and 12. I came to know her over the summer when we were both grieving for the loss of our mutual friend, Leslie Fischer. Erika and I talk about how her boys comforted her the day of Leslie's funeral and wanted to take positive action in her memory that day. In our conversation, she shares the ways in which she and her husband have encouraged her sons to focus on empathy, gratitude, and daily acts of service. Her sons document these things on a website they created called budgetphilanthropist.com. After 18 years as an on-air correspondent for PBS's nightly business report, Erika found herself at a career crossroads. We talk about how freelance journalism has given her an opportunity to engage herself and her boys in conscious decision-making about the projects she pursues. She also gets honest about her new entrepreneurial passion, a media company to inform children about the news in their world, and shares how she perseveres through frustration to find the path to her vision, and how going mountain climbing with her boys became a metaphor for facing fear of failure in her new venture. I hope you get inspired, as I did, about consciously instilling the values of kindness, empathy, and acts of service in your children, that you realize you are not alone if you too are struggling to make a new vision become real, and that you feel enriched by the generosity Erika so freely shares. Erika and I are grateful we've now connected, and we know our friend Leslie would be too. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. So Erika, welcome to episode 8 of the Mother's Quest podcast. I'm really honored to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So anyone who listened to my introductory episode, 00, heard me talk about our friend Leslie, who passed away from pancreatic cancer over the summer. And the mantra that closes every episode was inspired by her and the way that she lived her life, her whole life, but in particular since she was diagnosed. And the way that I came to know you better, even though sounds like we did meet a few times in college, was several of us had been posting on Leslie's Facebook page around the time of her funeral, and you posted something that your sons wrote on a blog of theirs, which really touched me, and I reached out to you. Would you tell me again a little bit about that site and how your two boys supported you the day of Leslie's funeral?
Yeah, I remember the day well, and I was not intending to go on social media. It was a very, very, very sad day in our house, and I was weepy and walking around the house just feeling this intense sorrow that I'm sure anyone who's lost somebody that they love knows all too well. And my sons were, extremely upset to see me in this state because they're used to me being the person that supports them through their heartache. And they knew, they didn't know Leslie well, but they knew what a dear friend she was to me, because when I would get off the phone with her, I would have a smile on my face and I would be uplifted. And we went and visited her. We had gone to visit her family in the spring before her death. And so they got a chance to know her and what a just an amazing, upbeat person she was, and what an influence she had been in my life. So that when she passed away and I couldn't go to California, I was in New York, I was just heartbroken. So it was just sad. And they said, what can we do to support you? You help us when we're down in the dumps, and when something, crisis hits, our family pulls together. What can we do to support you, Mom? And I said, there's really nothing you can do. Just take stock of your blessings and be thankful every day for the blessings that we have. And they said, that's really not enough. We need to do something more. This is somebody who has influenced your life so deeply. What can we do? And I said, what do you have in mind? And they said, let's do an act of kindness. Let's try to do something to improve this world on this extremely sad day. So I said, okay, why don't you put away the groceries? That was the first thing that I could do. And they did do that, because they knew I was just wanted to sit down, and I was crying my eyes out. And we opened up a photo album, and we talked about Leslie, and then it was time to go. And they said, why don't we go get some lunch, and we'll talk about Leslie, and we'll walk around and we'll do some good deeds. And, the fact that they could sell it is not, let's just go out to lunch, but let's go talk about Leslie and we'll try to help this world, is what made me get up, get dressed, brush my teeth, and leave the house. So we went and we just picked up trash around the waterfront near us. And just the act of picking up trash and throwing it away and trying to make that horrible day just slightly better, put me in a. It just made me appreciate how amazing a family can be in a time of intense heartbreak. And I don't even know what word to use, because heartbreak isn't even strong enough for the way that I was feeling that day.
And when I read their post, so they have a website of their own.
Yes, it's called budgetphilanthropist.com. And what it is our family is very philanthropic, and we do philanthropy in the traditional ways that many families do, but we also have committed ourselves to daily acts of kindness. So we try to do something that leaves the world slightly better than the way that we woke up in the morning. And it could be something small, like throwing trash away on a waterfront, or it could be something bigger, like starting a bake sale to aid victims of a natural disaster. So I urge them to create this website so that they could document some of these things and remember them, years down the road when we're trying to rack our brains for some of the things that they've done. And it also inspires other people to contribute their ideas and their thoughts, and to do things like this to try to help the world when there's really nothing you can do on a day where you feel, is one of the worst days of your life.
So I'm looking forward to going deeper into how you instilled these values in your sons and inspired them to create the site and to continually update it. But the day that I read their post, I was really touched by how deeply they were feeling connected to you and wanting to support you, and how they reflected on in helping you in that seemingly small way. They could see they were making a difference, but how much better they felt to know empathy, that they were part of supporting you.
Yeah, Julie, empathy is a key value in our house, that I want my kids to grow up feeling connected to other people and be able to empathize with other people and understand the different journeys that other people have and their challenges. So, I expected them to support me, but I'm not sure that I really expected fully them to. They got me to talk about a lot. It made me feel better because they got me to talk about a lot of the memories that I had with Leslie. For example, they asked me deeper questions. What, did Leslie know that she was dying? What was your last conversation with her like? How is her family coping? These are tough questions, and I admire them for having the courage to be able to ask them.
And something I admire in you is that you were open to having that conversation with them and going to some places that were vulnerable and sad for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't have these conversations with the people that matter most in your life, I'm not sure who I could have them with. And it's always interesting for me to hear their perspectives on issues like death and dying, and on issues that are confronting our nation, whether it's politics or social justice. It challenges me in my thinking.
So we're going to shift gears to the first question I like to ask every guest on the podcast, which is for you to tell me a little bit about your life as a child, where you grew up, and the impact that your mother had on shaping who you are today.
So my mom definitely played a major role in my shaping my view of the world and my upbringing. But what's remarkable is my dad played as equal a role. He's a psychiatrist and he works from home most of the time. So I was as close, or I am currently as close with my mom and my dad, which is, I think, unusual for a lot of mothers out there, that they get their role model behavior from their mothers and not always from their fathers. But my dad, too, like my mom, is extremely nurturing and supportive. And both of them have always been there for me 100%. So I was very fortunate to be able to learn from their example. They spend a lot of time together. They're best friends, and they have a wonderful marriage. And I think that's a key ingredient to a happy family.
And where did you grow up, and what do you feel like were some of the things that they did? As sounds like they had a very solid partnership. What did they instill in you as you were growing up?
I grew up in the suburbs outside of Washington, D.C., in the suburbs, and what they did was try to instill in me values that I try to use in my current with my kids. For example, they really were not into materialism. They tried to teach me that self-esteem does not come from the clothes that you wear or the car that you drive or the things that you buy, but from the things that you do and the contributions that you make. And that's where they helped me get my self-esteem. And remember, this is the 80s where it's conspicuous consumption, and we're all, a lot of people are walking around wearing big logos with big hair, doing, big things. And my parents weren't really into that, which, they used to, for example, once in a while take me down to Anacostia, Washington, which is, not as affluent a community, and just make sure that we knew that our privileged suburb was not the real world.
And so the E in EPIC stands for engaging mindfully with your children. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you brought those values that your parents instilled in you to your kids, to helping them become the sensitive, philanthropic people they are.
For me, the key is communication. My parents always had the doors open and really were engaged in my life. It was a sort of home where my friends used to love to come over to hang out with my parents because they were so approachable and introspective, and they really would talk about whatever it is that was on your mind or you wanted to talk about. And I tried wherever possible to do that with my sons. It can be a challenge with my older son is 13, my younger son is 12, and they aren't always, willing to open up about what's on their mind. But they know that when they're ready, I'm always going to do my best to listen to them and try to support them the same way that they, support me. So when they are going through something, I find that often our best conversations happen in the car when I'm driving, and they are looking, out the window, and they'll ask me an interesting question, and I sort of get a window into what's going on in their mind, what's going on in school, what's going on the baseball field, or something that they're struggling with. And that's sort of a key that I got from my childhood, is learning that it's important to cultivate this close communication with the people that, in your family that you're close with, so that you have the support you need to tackle those obstacles.
I've had that experience. I often talk about one of the best times for me and my older son, Ryan, are on our way to dropping him off at school in the morning. And even though I could join a carpool and not be the one to drop them off every day, I don't want to let go of that time, because I find we're able to talk about, what's on his mind going into school, and was there maybe something that happened the night before with a friend that he's thinking about. We also, after the election, talked on the way to going to school about, well, what are the things we can control, and what could he do at school that day to help another person. And I find that time that you wouldn't think normally would be prime engagement can sometimes be the most powerful.
And I also think bedtime is also key. Sometimes things come out at night, right before they go to bed. They're having trouble sleeping. There's something on their mind that's another time of day I think I try to tune into, so that I can connect with them and hear what's going on with their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. So the P in EPIC stands for passionate and purposeful, and it's making a difference beyond your family. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you have made a contribution and what you feel most passionate about these days.
I was an on-air anchor and correspondent for the Nightly Business Report, which is the most watched business show on television. It's on PBS. And I did that for 18 years. So 18 years of relentless daily deadlines, intense work, being an instant expert on all sorts of issues of financial news and politics. And then it ended, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do next. I loved my job, but I wasn't upset that it ended, because it gave me the opportunity to try some new things that I don't think I would have necessarily done had I been locked into that job. And I don't make no mistake, I loved my job. But now I'm doing some freelance reporting, and I'm much, much happier, because I get to pick and choose some of the assignments that I get to do, and it gives me room for other things in my life that I didn't have time for before.
I want to get to some of those other things and hear about what new opportunities have come to you from this career change. But before we do that, I imagine that you being a woman correspondent for the financial news is somewhat unusual. I'd like to hear a little bit about what that was like, and in what ways you feel like you were making a unique contribution by being that role model for other women.
I never really felt like a role model for other women, but I felt like being a woman was an advantage, that it kind of set me apart, that maybe I was more likely to be noticed in a room because I was different. So I tried to, wherever possible, use that to my advantage. And I think sometimes maybe I was underestimated, and that could actually be a good thing, because it got doors open, because I was viewed as non-threatening to do an interview with somebody like a Treasury Secretary, where other people had been declined, that they might have underestimated my abilities. And so I, wherever possible, tried to use whatever would set me apart to my advantage, as opposed to seeing it as, a drawback.
And so what are some of the things that you've noticed have become new ways for you to explore making a difference since you shifted from your job at PBS?
Well, I'm doing freelance work, for example, for Reuters and for other news outlets. And what I'm doing differently is how I'm approaching the work that I do. Before, I would get up, I would go to my job, I would work there, I would come home. It was sort of, on autopilot. But now I feel extremely fortunate that I have the ability to say no to things that don't interest me or are not appropriate, and yes to things that do interest me. So now when I get an invitation approached about doing some work, I have the luxury of thinking about it. And I try to think about how this is going to help me and how it's going to affect our family. And wherever possible, I try to involve the kids in a discussion about what taking on this assignment will mean. So, for example, if I was asked about doing some anchoring for a Australian news program that starts at 6:30 in the morning. And that's not the ideal time in our household these days. The kids have to go to school and things have to get done. But instead of just deciding it on my own, I talked to the kids and I said, I've been approached about an opportunity to do this job. What do you think about it? And they said, I think you should definitely take it. And I said, but it's going to require sacrifices on your part. You're going to have to get yourself up. You're going to have to get yourself to school on your own. And are you prepared to take that on? And they said, absolutely, no big deal. We'll do it. We got it. My husband was a little more reluctant. And he said, are you sure that we can, trust that he said he starts work at even earlier than 6:30. And he said, do you think we can trust that the kids can, make their own breakfast, get themselves to school and do it? And I said, let's give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out well, then we'll know. And I'll hire a babysitter or we'll take a step, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt because they, are committed to doing it. And let's see if we can make this work. And he fortunately was game for trying it. And it really worked out well for our family.
So I love, Erika, that you involved your kids in that way. And what are some of the other ways in which you have pursued your interests and your desire to make a difference, and you've involved your boys?
I'm thinking about it because there's so many different things. I guess whenever I feel confronted with a dilemma, wherever possible, I try to get their support because I find that life is a lot more harmonious when I get buy-in from my kids. So if I'm wrestling with something, I definitely try to get their input. So, for example, I was asked to take on a leadership role for our school's fundraising efforts, and it requires a lot of evening meetings, and it requires a strong commitment to being at the school a lot. And I knew that would eat into a lot of the free time that I had after school with the kids. So I asked them, what do you think about this? I've been asked to take this role in fundraising for your school, but it's going to require that I'm there, a lot of nights and weekends, and that's not necessarily going to be good for our family. Do you think I should take it, or do you think I should, turn it down? And I wasn't sure what they were going to say. You know what they said? What do you think, Mom? Do you think this will help you? Do you think this is something you would enjoy? And I liked the way that they were asking me the questions that I was wrestling with, and that was going to influence whether or not they were going to support this idea that I had. And I wasn't even sure whether I wanted it or not. But I find that if you have these discussions enough with your kids, they're going to ask you the questions that you were often grappling with, maybe internally, but hadn't really expressed formally.
Yeah, I love, especially as my older son has gotten to the point where he can really be involved in these conversations and add a lot of value. And recently he expressed to my husband and I that he wanted more of that he wanted us to look to him also for guidance. And I found when I do that he asks me some really powerful questions that I've appreciated.
Yeah, and it builds trust. Sorry, I cut you off, but it builds a trust it builds a trust and a communication that I think extends well beyond that one conversation. That they know that you are wrestling with these issues and you're honest with them about the things that are going on in your life, and that you're presenting your true, authentic self to them, and that I think it's really good for the mother-son relationship.
So, related to the P in Epic, what are you most seeking now for yourself? What are you on a quest for in terms of making a difference in this new chapter for yourself?
I'm in the midst of trying to launch a media company aimed at kids. As you know, kids today are bombarded by news and often don't have the skills or the level of understanding to be able to understand exactly what the nuances of the news are. And it can be very scary for kids, particularly around, say, 11 years old or 12 years old. So I'm trying to launch a media company that will give kids access to information that's age appropriate. But it's really been a lot harder than I thought it would be. I'm a journalist, and I'm a hard worker, and I am a communicator, and I have a lot of the right skills, but I also recognize some of the skills that I'm lacking. I'm not somebody who's savvy about mobile advertising. I'm not somebody who's savvy about writing code. So it's really a challenging journey for me right now to try to get the right complementary skills that I need in order to launch this business.
What do you hope will be the impact when you create that? What's the change you'd like to see in young people like your kids and mine from being exposed to what you're creating?
Well, it goes back to communication. Kids today are bombarded with news. They don't understand the news. If you're trying to shield your child from what's happening in the world, it's often a losing proposition. Whether you're walking down the street and they see headlines that can be disturbing about a terror attack or a natural disaster or something tragic, they're going to ask questions about it. And parents are often don't even understand necessarily all the nuances of the news either. So I want to try to frame the news in a way that kids can understand it so that they can ask the questions, and that our society can even beyond that grow into trying to develop a type of society that will make the changes that I'm sure that a lot of our kids would like to see happen.
And how will that news be delivered in your picture? Is it going to be young people sharing it, adults? I would love to hear more about how it's going to unfold.
Well, I see it primarily aimed at kids around, say, age 11, who are probably too young to read the newspaper or wouldn't necessarily pick up the newspaper or watch it on TV, but are still curious about what's happening in the world, what's happening in politics, what's happening in economics, what's happening in the world. It's strange to me that kids today, they don't really get current events the way that we did back in our day, where we would have like the Weekly Reader or Scholastic or Time Out Kids they have. But there's really no dynamic way that they get a daily update on what's happening in the world and can stay informed and really have access to news that's really age appropriate, and that parents will feel comfortable with. Because if you're a parent, you aren't necessarily comfortable with your kid watching the evening news and with all the violence and the sensationalist content. You might want them to have a honest, but also age appropriate picture of what's happening.
Well, it sounds amazing. And I really look forward to following the development of that. It's connecting. Something that you just said reminds me of the I in Epic, invested in yourself, because you named some things that are feeling a little bit uncomfortable for you right now as you're creating this. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the ways in which you notice you're stretching and growing as you move into this new endeavor, and what support you have sought out and found.
Well, I wouldn't exactly tie that to I. I would call it more F for frustrated, because I'm at a time where I'm really not feeling like I'm having the success that I wanted to have for all of the effort that I'm putting into the search. So I'm meeting with lots of people, and everybody wants to help me, but I haven't found that magical connection that's able to help me in the way that I need. In other words, sometimes the more people that you ask for advice, the more confusing it can get to find the solution. Everybody has a different take on what I should be doing and where I should go and how I should go about trying to find a partner or the skill set that I need. So I'm still trying to figure that out. And I'm still meeting with lots of people and having conversations. And I feel like I'm getting closer and closer. But until I am able to finally pull the trigger and go in a different direction, I feel like I'm going to be faced with this uncertainty.
So as somebody who has been in the midst of creating something new, I really connect to what you've named as the F for frustrated. You know, there are moments as a facilitator during a meeting, we often call it the groan zone, where there's so many different ideas and nothing has converged yet. And I have been in that space with Mother's Quest as well, and I feel like I've come through some of that. But I would just want to invite you to think about the F also as standing for faith. And for me, just to reflect back my belief in you, that you have a deep purpose and have shown through your kids what gifts you have and how much you're able to impact them. So I hope that you will not get too frustrated and remember and stay connected to your vision.
Thank you. It's not the passion that's the problem, because I'm so passionate about this project. The devil is truly in the details, and it's trying to figure out, when there's many different ways to skin a cat, which is the best strategy, which is the most cost-effective strategy, which is the fastest strategy. They're not always the same strategy. So I'm trying to figure that out, and I appreciate your support.
So, what are the ways in which you are investing in yourself right now as you're moving through this process?
In terms of my skill level, I'm always trying to learn new skills. I'm reading as much as I can. It's exhausting. And I can't say that I like that part of this endeavor. I like to do the journalist side of this project. I'm not really as interested in the business side of this project, but that's a necessary ingredient that I know that I have to have in order to make this venture successful. So I'm reading up on subjects that are dry, that I'm not necessarily interested in, but I hope that all this learning will pay off and that I'll be able to make a more educated decision, but it's not always fun and games.
So, one of the ways in which you're investing in yourself and your vision right now is moving through some things that feel hard and not necessarily the things you love.
Absolutely. And I've always, like I said, trying to challenge the way of my thinking, because I feel like so much of what I do is deep seated in patterns of behavior that have been going on since I was born practically. I have a fear of failure, for example, that I really want to conquer, and I'm doing all that I can to conquer that. Like, for example, I took my kids mountain climbing because I'm afraid of heights. And I knew that if I could do that, I would feel empowered, and that would give me confidence to do some other things in my life, like make these hard decisions that maybe I was holding back on. So I'm constantly trying to challenge myself and give myself room to fail. And that's something that I've struggled with my whole life.
I love the power of metaphor and that you chose to physically take on something in your body, like doing the mountain climbing, to get yourself on the right
mistake,
mindset.
it was terrifying. I was really terrified. But I also knew that if I told my kids at the end that I was afraid of heights, because they sort of knew I was mildly afraid of heights, but if I told them how terrified I was at the end, that would be good for them to know that I was able to take something that was a disability for me and turn it around and challenge myself and conquer my fears, literally.
So that actually connects to the C in EPIC, which is about being in community on your journey, being connected to a strong support network. You've already talked a lot about the ways in which you reach out to your husband and your kids as a key support for you. What are some other ways in which you've been able to develop relationships to support you?
Well, I think it's important to recognize it. There's a saying that it takes a village, but in living here in New York, it really takes a city. You need to have as wide a support network and as much as you can, people who have your back as you can develop. So what are the ways that I try to develop that? Well, I meet the parents of my kids' friends. I make my own friends professionally. And I just I'm a big believer in karma, I'm a big believer in the favor bank, and that you do whatever you can to help other people and they'll be there for you in your time of need.
I'm curious if there's a particular example that comes to mind of a time when you helped somebody else and then they came back and brought back the favor to you.
There are so many times. I'm going to try to think of one. Okay, so there's a mother who's going through a divorce, and she was supposed to be in court that day, and ended up being a half day, and she had no sitter. And it's a mother that I knew, but I didn't know well. So I told her I knew that this was going to be a tough day for her, and let me take her kids. And I didn't just take her older son, who is my son's age, but also her younger son. And I tried to keep them amused. I took them out for a fun day. I think we went bowling. And I didn't do it because I expected any payback. You can't do that. But when I was in the bind, she has always had my back in terms of let me take the kids. And she even offered to take the kids for an overnight. That if I wanted to go away with my husband, then she would be happily do that. And I know that when I choose to call in my chits, she'll be there for me. And it's important to know that you can't do it with the goal of getting something back. But if you cultivate relationships with people and you do enough for them, they're going to hopefully be the type of people that will want to return the favor.
The thread that I hear you weave through everything in your epic life is just this theme of generosity and giving so freely, and noticing that it's not always, tremendously grand gestures that make a difference, but it's these little acts of kindness along the way that add up.
I'm a huge believer in gratitude, and I feel grateful every day for all the amazing things in my life. I'm extremely grateful to my husband because he gives me the flexibility nowadays to take on freelance assignments, that whereas a lot of moms don't have that luxury to take a break in their career and work freelance while they're trying to launch their entrepreneurial venture. And I try to let him know that every day. I text him a thank you, and I let him know how appreciated he is, because he doesn't have the luxury of picking and choosing his work chunks, his work assignments, and he loves his job, fortunately, but it's grueling for him, and he has a long travel schedule. So I feel I try to treat him extremely respectfully and let him know how grateful I am. And it's about the orientation that you have towards the world, whether you're looking at what you don't have or what you do have. And I feel very grateful that I don't have financial worry the way a lot of Americans have, because that can certainly put a big strain on your relationships. And I feel grateful that I have the time in my life to be introspective and take stock of what I want to do next.
I wanted to gather some more of your lessons learned that can help me to live my epic life and anyone else who's listening. And I have this sense, given the work that you've done, that you may have some lessons to share around this idea of financial responsibility. What have you learned through your work?
I would say it even started earlier. It started from my parents. My parents were a big believer that your credit score was extremely important, and they taught me that from an early age, along with budgeting, along with the importance of saving. And I think that that's something that was a big gift that they gave to me, was this ability to be in control of my finances, so that when I got my first job and I was barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck, they taught me the importance of figuring out a way to put money into a retirement plan, and a lot of the things that a lot of parents maybe don't know out there. I was fortunate enough to get those kinds of lessons early. So that's how I've approached life, is being financially responsible and trying to save as much as I can, because fortunately, I didn't have to learn those lessons later in life when the damage has already been done.
So, Erika, tell me about a recent moment you've had when you felt you were really living your epic life.
It's New Year, so it's a time of when we're all taking stock of our life and making resolutions and things that we would like to do differently. And my younger son took the initiative to make a New Year's resolution list. And he didn't just make the list, but he listed the strategies for getting there. And it prompted all of us to do the same in some of our goals for the year and how we would achieve it. And it brought about this discussion of how we can support each other in achieving our goals. Some of the goals are small. I want to eat better. And some of them are more lofty, like I want to figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my life and my career. So it really is nice when you can open the door for a conversation with your kids and know that whatever the struggle is that you're dealing with, there's people here around, that you've surrounded yourself with people who hear you, who understand your struggle and want to help you achieve whatever the goal is that you end up achieving.
I love the way that you just, so much of what you share comes back to your connection and relationship with your children and your family. It's evident how that has really become a vehicle for you for living your life and becoming your best self. So what do you think are the biggest lessons you've learned or treasures you've found on your own quest?
I would have to say one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is being true to myself. I'm by nature a people pleaser, so I feel this obligation to try to make everybody happy, particularly the people that I'm closest to, my sons, my husband, my family. And sometimes it's difficult and it feels selfish to turn them down and make a selfish choice, but that you think is the right decision for you. So that's one thing that I've really tried to make a priority of doing these days, is really taking ownership of my life and taking ownership of my successes and my failures and being honest about them. And that's not always easy, to admit shortcomings, to admit character flaws. And it's something that I'm working on.
So before we close the podcast episode with our takeaways and reflections from this conversation, I wanted to ask you if there's anything you'd like to invite me or any other mothers listening to do with our children or for ourselves to support us living our epic life.
I have a few ideas. We talked a little bit before about financial freedom, and certainly if you can free yourself from as much financial worry as you can, that's going to help you achieve your other dreams. And my dear friend Bobby Rebell, who's a fellow TV anchor, she recently wrote a book about becoming a financial grown-up. And what's interesting about this book is it features advice from high achievers on how to achieve your dreams. And these people share anecdotes about moments in their life when they were at a juncture and how it affected them positively in making smart financial, or motivated them in many cases, not always because of a positive event, but how these episodes in their lives motivated them to make smart financial changes in their life. So I think it's something that all of us can relate to, sort of being at a crossroads, facing a difficult challenge, and then how they conquered it in order to achieve financial success. So the book is called How to Become a Financial Grown-Up, and I would strongly urge anybody who's wrestling with these issues to check out that book. And we also talked about small acts of kindness, and there's a foundation called the Ractivist Foundation, Random Act of Kindness Foundation, and you can find them on Facebook or on the internet. And you have to apply, but it's a good thing. I think that they try to weed out people who who are not committed necessarily to a campaign of kindness. And I think it would be a good thing for almost every family to try if you're inclined. Maybe say for a week or for a month or even a day, say, let's try to do something positive for this world. And it can be give yourself permission to make it something small. It could be simply helping somebody, holding the door open for somebody in a wheelchair, or it doesn't have to be some grand gesture, but just something that you can point to at the end of the day that helped improve the world.
I love that. Well, I will definitely take you up on both of those challenges. I would like to bring more of that consciousness about everyday kindness and these ways to make a difference and become a philanthropist daily into my own life and the life of my children. And I also definitely need to become more of a financial grown-up. So I will get that book and look forward to reading the lessons learned from those other stories in there. Thank you for sharing both of those.
You're welcome.
So we end every podcast episode with an opportunity to reflect on any takeaways we each got from this conversation. And I just want to acknowledge you and tell you that the biggest message I've taken is how thoughtfully and consciously you engage your kids in conversation about your values, about what's going on in the world, to have them inform decisions that you're making that affect the family, and to thinking about how you can all really make a difference. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to go deeper with you to see how you bring that to your family.
And I want to thank you for the support that you've given me. You heard about some of my successes and some of my challenges, and it's uncomfortable a lot of times to talk about frustrations and areas where you don't feel like you're being successful, but I guess that's all part of the journey. And I want to thank you for giving me some strategies to help me cope with some of the insecurities that I'm facing in launching my new venture.
I really appreciate you being vulnerable and honest and sharing that with us. And I do have a lot of faith in you, that you'll find your way. And I hope also that Mother's Quest can be a place of support for you, that you can listen in on future episodes and be part of our Facebook group conversations. And then also in January, early February, I'm going to be doing a pilot of my Mother's Quest reflection circles to provide a space for a small group of mothers to be part of each other's journey and bring our own coaching and listening skills to support one another. So maybe you want to be a part of that.
I love that idea. I look forward to it.
So thank you again. I'm really appreciative of this time and grateful that our mutual love for Leslie and being inspired by her life connected us.
Me too.
Thanks, Erika.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.